Perfect. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining. My name is Janelle Groff, and I'm with the University of Montana at the Flathead Lake Biological Station. I'm a research coordinator for the Montana Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program, or PSPP. And today we're going to explore how herbicide use can affect water quality in the environment. So I work at the Flathead Lake Biological Station, which also I might refer to as FLBS, which is situated on the east shore of Flathead Lake, and our mission is to serve the Flathead Lake region and beyond through aquatic research, monitoring, and education and outreach. So the Montana Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program team includes myself as a research coordinator, Rachel Mallison, assistant research professor and principal investigator, and Chloe Zacher. She's our 2025 Big Sky Watershed Corps member. So this session concludes the Missoula County Herbicide Basics webinar series. This series aims to provide you knowledge to when, where, and why to use herbicides. It is true that pests are a problem, and this series gives you the know-how on one way to deal with pests, but just know that it is not the only way. So pesticides are a tool. They aid in numerous things such as crop protection, livestock management, mosquito control, garden and lawn management, managing invasive species, and a lot more. So see the Swiss Army knife here, borrowing this from some folks at Montana State University Extension. So typically when you need to use your Swiss Army knife, you might just typically pull out the tool that's easiest to access and most versatile, which is the knife. But there's so many other specialized tools that can do specific jobs. So you can think of pesticides, which includes herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides, as sort of the knife of the Swiss Army knife. But there are a lot of other tools to consider and best practices for when you do need to use pesticides, both of which I will touch on later. So, sorry, I'm having some issues with my slide right now. There we go. Okay. So from previous sessions, you likely learned some of these best practices. And just to do a quick recap, the first session, you explored how herbicides do their job and considerations for selecting an herbicide. In the second, you explored real-life examples and discussed methods and regulation. Then in the third, you learned about weed identification, when to apply, limiting impact, and keeping yourself safe. Today is the last session, and I hope you will walk away with a deeper understanding of how herbicide use can affect a watershed, the vital connection between land practices and water quality, the consequences of improper herbicide use, and the value of integrated pest management and best practices. We'll also look at potential impacts on aquatic resources and strategies to reduce non-point source pollution. I'll also give you an overview of PSPP and how you can get involved. So why is this important? Every action that we make on the land, whether it's applying herbicides, managing crops, maintaining landscapes, they can have an impact on the water that we rely on. Pest management is important and a part of all of our lives: lawns, soccer fields, parks, gardens, agriculture, and a lot more. Responsible pest management empowers individuals to be stewards of the land and safeguard the resources that we all depend on. And clean water is essential for our health, our communities, our agriculture, our ecosystems, and by understanding the broader context of watersheds and using herbicides responsibly and exploring alternatives, we can protect our water resources. A key part to all of this is understanding how land and water are connected. Remember that everything we do on the land can affect the watersheds surrounding us. The USGS defines a watershed as the area of land where all the water that falls in it and drains off of it goes to a common point. Watersheds are made up of surface water, lakes, rivers, streams, groundwater, water stored underground and in aquifers, and the land that surrounds these water sources. Watersheds are influenced by topography, in which the shape of the land is. Elevation and topography and gravity work together to create infinite pathways for water to travel once it reaches the Earth's surface. Watersheds can vary greatly in size, and there are smaller watersheds nested within larger ones. So you can think of as small as a single creek and compared to a whole basin, which like the figure that you see. A watershed is more than just land and water. It's a living system, and it supports everything around it. Every drop of rain that falls eventually flows through a watershed, carrying with it the story of how we manage and use our land. Watersheds provide essential ecosystem services that benefit all of us. They filter our water, reduce flooding, support wildlife, and even help regulate our climate. Watersheds are very complex, and the way that we use the land can have a big impact on how well our watersheds work. Farming can wash fertilizers and pesticides into rivers and streams. Building towns, cities, and roads covers the ground with pavement, which stops water from soaking into the ground, which can cause more flooding and runoff pollution. Cutting down forests takes away trees that help clean water and hold soil in place. Even too much recreation, like hiking or boating in sensitive areas, can damage plants and soil. All of these activities make it harder for watersheds to do their job, keeping our water clean, preventing floods, and supporting wildlife. And they can lead to something called non-point source pollution. Unlike pollution that comes from a single pipe or a factory, non-point source pollution comes from many places at once. When it rains or snow melts, water runs over the land. This is called runoff. Runoff can pick up pollutants like oil, fertilizer, pesticides, pet waste, and trash. And then this polluted runoff flows into rivers, lakes, and streams and can harm our water quality and wildlife. And because it's so hard to trace back to one source, it's also harder to control. That's why it's important for all of us to understand how our actions can affect the land and the water that connects all of us. When all that polluted runoff enters our waterways, it can directly affect water quality. Water quality is a measure of how clean and safe our water is for drinking, swimming, fishing, and supporting wildlife. Poor water quality can lead to harmful algal blooms, unsafe drinking water, and damage to aquatic ecosystems. It can also affect our local economies that rely on tourism, agriculture, or fishing. Water quality is influenced by many factors, including the amount of sediment, nutrients, bacteria, and chemicals in the water. And because these pollutants often come from many small sources across the landscape, the non-point source pollution, protecting water quality means thinking about the big picture, how we manage the land, use chemicals, and care for our watershed. In Montana, the importance of clean water isn't just a value. The Montana Constitution guarantees all citizens the right to a clean and healthful environment, recognizing that environmental protection is essential for public health, safety, and quality of life. The Montana Water Quality Act protects beneficial uses of water like drinking, irrigation, recreation, and supporting fish and wildlife. Montana has a very deep connection to its natural sources and is committed to preserving them. Monitoring water quality is one of the most important tools that we have for protecting our watersheds. It helps us detect pollutants before they can cause serious harm to people, wildlife, or the environment. Regular testing also allows us to track changes over time, identify pollution sources, and evaluate whether land use practices are improving or harming water quality. Beyond just spotting those problems, water quality monitoring helps us assess the overall health of ecosystems. And all this information is essential for making smart decisions about land management, restoration, and conservation. The Monitoring Montana Waters program is another program at the Flathead Lake Biological Station, and it supports water quality monitoring across the state. The program supports watershed groups, conservation districts, and citizen scientists by providing training, technical support, and data tools. MMW helps ensure that local water quality efforts are scientifically sound and useful for decision making by building local capacity and connecting communities with high quality data. The program really plays a key role in protecting Montana's rivers, lakes, and streams. So MMW helps communities monitor nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus and sediments from erosion. These are common forms of non-point source pollution, and they're relatively affordable to test for and provide valuable insight into watershed health. However, there's a much broader range of pollutants out there that we often don't monitor for, like pharmaceuticals, which can enter waterways through wastewater and septic systems, and even in small amounts, they can affect fish behavior, reproduction, and hormone systems. Metals, which includes lead, mercury, arsenic, and others, often from mining, industry, or old infrastructure. Metal pollution can be toxic to both humans and aquatic life, even at low levels. PFAS, also known as forever chemicals, they are used in nonstick cookware, firefighting foam, and packaging. They don't break down easily and are linked to several health risks. And pesticides, which is our focus today, of course. Pesticides can run off into water bodies, harming aquatic organisms and potentially contaminating drinking water. Pesticides can enter surface water and groundwater through runoff, leaching, or drift, especially after rainfall or irrigation. And once in the water, they can contaminate drinking water sources and harm aquatic ecosystems. Even at low concentrations, some pesticides can be toxic to fish, amphibians, and aquatic insects. Long-term exposure may also affect human health, especially for vulnerable populations. Monitoring for pesticides in our waters is limited and quite challenging. Testing for a wide range of pesticides is expensive and requires specialized labs. Pesticides vary in how they move through the environment, through soil and water, so it's very hard to try and understand how they're impacting our environment. And the full extent of their impact in Montana's waters remains pretty unclear. Montana's freshwater systems, rivers, lakes, wetlands, etc., are vital for both wildlife and people. These ecosystems provide clear water, support fish and wildlife, control floods, and a lot more, as I've touched on. Each type of water system plays a unique role. Rivers transport nutrients and connect habitats. Lakes can store water and protect and support recreation. And wetlands filter pollutants and provide critical breeding grounds for many species. The biodiversity within these systems helps keep them healthy and resilient. And biodiversity means the variety of life in a place, all the different fish, insects, plants, and tiny organisms living in the river, lake, or wetland. When biodiversity declines, ecosystems become more vulnerable to pollution, climate change, invasive species, and other threats. This matters for human health too. Degraded aquatic ecosystems can lead to unsafe drinking water, more frequent algal blooms, and the loss of flood and recreation opportunities. Food and flood control and recreation opportunities. Protecting our aquatic ecosystems means protecting the services that they provide to all of us and protecting biodiversity. And when we talk about protecting biodiversity and keeping our waters clean, it's pretty clear that monitoring for pesticides is very important, and how we manage pesticide use plays a big role in potential pesticide pollution. And that's where the Montana Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program comes in, or PSPP. So in October of 2023, Rachel Mallison received funding from the EPA to develop the PSPP, and funding for the project includes $6.6 million and 2.2 million is promised in cost share, which comes from non-federal sources like volunteer work. This is a 5-year implementation grant, so our efforts are focused on implementing actions to reduce pesticide pollution in the upper Columbia River Basin portion of Montana, which I will touch on next. So the Columbia River Basin is one of the largest river systems in North America. It spans across 7 US states and part of Canada, supporting everything from agriculture and hydropower to fisheries and drinking water. With that scale comes complexity and challenges. And remember what we learned about watersheds. It's an area of land where all the water drains to a common point. So everything that happens on the land, farming, construction, herbicide application, can eventually affect the water that flows through it. Western Montana sits at the headwaters of the Columbia River Basin, and the headwaters are the source or the beginning of a river system, which in turn forms part of the full watershed. So our headwaters are formed in the mountains where snow melts or springs feed into smaller streams. These streams then join together to form larger rivers, such as the 3 forks of the Flathead River, north, middle, and south. These rivers come together to form the Flathead River, which flows in the Flathead Lake. From there, the water continues south to the Clark Fork River, eventually joining the Columbia River and finally reaching the Pacific Ocean. Along the way, water flows through forests, farms, cities, dams, and a lot more, which means what happens upstream, even hundreds of miles away, can have downstream impacts. The working area of the PSPP is the headwaters of the Columbia River Basin, and this area includes 12 counties in Montana, plus some work in North Idaho. The PSPP is a collaborative network in Western Montana. We're working to reduce pesticide pollution in our waters through sustainable best practices, and the program supports water quality monitoring, community education and engagement, and activities to improve water quality. Our priorities include green infrastructure, agricultural best management practices, community education, and human health impacts. We have partnered with 7 subaward recipients, meaning that they have received part of our funding to implement various projects through the landscape, and we do have additional funding to support new projects that align with our priorities. These are our subaward recipients, and I'm going to go through them quickly. Montana Department of Agriculture is expanding existing efforts in their waste pesticide disposal program and pesticide container recycling program. They're also monitoring groundwater for pesticides with their groundwater protection program. Montana Department of Environmental Quality is helping with education and outreach efforts, sharing information about pesticide use permits, and is working with local groups to support the use of native plants. Montana Watershed Coordination Council has helped me connect with new partners and collaborators, and they're helping with education and outreach efforts. Montana State University Extension is conducting lysimeter research to understand how pesticides might leach into groundwater. And the pesticide education program is supporting applicator training, events, and surveys to understand pesticide use. Kootenai Tribe of Idaho and the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes will be analyzing fish tissue for pesticides to better understand the potential for pesticides to bioaccumulate in aquatic food webs, and this research could inform potential human health risks. And the city of Missoula will be implementing various green stormwater infrastructure projects in Missoula. A key part to all of this work is understanding existing pesticide pollution in our waters. So right now there is no baseline data for pesticides in surface waters in Montana. And as I previously explained, we need to understand what pollution exists to track changes, identify sources, and make decisions to improve water quality before any harm comes to people, wildlife, or the environment. So we're collaborating with volunteers to support this effort, and we'll share our data publicly and use our interpreted results to support education and outreach efforts. So with our various subaward recipients and partners, the PSPP will be monitoring for pesticides in surface water, groundwater, and fish tissue. There will also be effectiveness monitoring for implementation projects, lysimeter research to understand that leaching potential, and those pesticide use surveys. The PSPP team, myself, Rachel, and Chloe, we are focused on the surface water monitoring efforts. And we collected our first samples just a few weeks ago at the end of April. And since then, we have made it our goal to collect around 25 to 30 samples every week. And we'll continue to collect samples through November all across Western Montana. I won't get into too much detail here, but to help us decide where to actually collect our samples, since it's such a big area, we use maps to visualize how different land use types may create different levels of risk associated with potential pesticide pollution. Education and outreach is a big part of PSPP, and as you can see on our conceptual figure, along the right-hand side is engagement throughout. So we want to reach as many people as we can to share about our program and ongoing efforts. We want to hear from people like you about your concerns and your knowledge, and learn together about what we can do to protect our waters. And the PSPP is not tied to any regulatory action to improve our waters. So there must be voluntary change, whether that includes best practices, riparian buffers, or less pesticide use. So what can you do? What might that voluntary change look like? I'll go over these a bit more in detail, but you can avoid drift, develop buffers, develop no spray zones, follow best practices, or explore alternative options. And before we dive in, I do just want to say that we're not saying that you can't use pesticides, but know that there are other options that may be worth exploring. And if pesticides are the right tool for the job, know how to best use them, and please be sure to follow the label. A buffer zone is an area of land that acts as a barrier between water and dry land, and it's often referred to as the riparian area. It's like a protective shield for the stream. Buffer zones, though, can also be areas between places where pesticides are used and sensitive spots, like near homes or where kids and pets play. Buffer zones help stop pesticides from drifting through the air or running off into unwanted areas. This protects water by keeping pesticides out, protecting aquatic life and water quality. It also reduces the risk of pesticide exposure for your neighbors and other residents. Sometimes the best way to start a buffer zone is to leave the area undisturbed, leave it alone. Alternatively, you can plant willows. They are an excellent riparian plant. Using native plants and trees to create buffers can intercept pesticides before they reach water. And just be sure to maintain an adequate buffer width. You can see from that bottom figure how big a buffer needs to be in order to capture different types of pollutants. Pesticides are not on that figure, but I think bigger than 50 feet seems reasonable, but that is a lot of space. Following best practices for pesticide use is especially important. Be sure to read the label, understand how to use a product and its cautions before you start. Apply pesticides in calm weather to avoid drift. Keep a safe distance from water bodies and sensitive areas, and limit the frequency of applications to reduce overall pesticide use. You may not need to apply 3 times a year if you're not having an intense problem. Thinking back to that Swiss Army knife, there are lots of specialized tools to manage pests. Integrated Pest Management, or IPM, has multiple tools for different tasks. This management strategy uses a variety of methods to manage pests effectively, and it really starts with identifying the pest and getting to know it, its biology and behavior. Next, assess whether the pest is actually causing a problem. Develop a pest management plan that includes monitoring, prevention, and control strategies. Set action thresholds to decide when pest control measures should be implemented. This can help avoid unnecessary interventions if the pest isn't actually causing a problem. Now I want to go over the types of control methods. IPM uses a pyramid approach to control pests, starting with the least invasive methods and moving to more invasive measures only when necessary. So at the base of the pyramid are cultural controls, which involve practices that improve plant health, such as crop rotation. Next are mechanical controls, which include physical removal of pests. Biological controls use natural predators to manage pest populations, like ladybugs for aphid control. Then at the top of the pyramid are chemical controls, which involve applying pesticides when necessary. By utilizing buffers, best practices, and IPM, we can control pests while minimizing environmental impact. This is the goal of PSPP, protecting healthy watersheds so they can continue to provide clean water, support our communities, and offer recreational opportunities. And as I said at the beginning, clean water is essential for our health, our communities, agriculture, and our ecosystems. And by really having a good idea, a good understanding of that broader watershed context, and using our herbicides responsibly and exploring those alternatives, we can protect our water quality. As we've learned, actions that we make on the land can have impact on the water that we rely on. Pest management is important and it's all around us. And that responsible pest management helps us be good stewards of the land and protect our waters. And that is all I have today. I do want to say that we have a newsletter for PSPP, and that QR code is on here. Also, feel free to check out our website, and happy to take any questions.